I don't have any questions submitted via form this week, so I'm just going to start with questions from the chat. And I'm going to see if, I don't know if I can do this, but I wonder if I can invite people to like get on stream and talk and ask their question. I'm not sure that that's something that can be done, but let me see. I think if I invite somebody to co-host, that might allow you to get on the camera and talk. So if anybody wants to volunteer as tribute and see if that works, let me know in the chat and I'll invite you as a co-host and see if you can come on and ask your question and talk for a minute and then go. Otherwise, just ask questions in the chat and I'll try to answer them as best I can. That's kind of what I'm here for. Can everybody hear everything okay? Like I'm sitting here talking. I don't know if anybody can actually hear me, but hopefully y'all can. Hello, Victor. Hello, Tomas. Hello, Scott. Okay, sounds like people can hear me. So what's on your mind? What questions do y'all have? What do you want to know? How has my week been? It's been kind of crazy, honestly. Not in a bad way, just really, really busy. My kids were out of school on last Friday and this Monday. It was a holiday in the States. So my whole work week is, I've missed a day, so I'm trying to catch up from the start on Tuesday. And my daughter is a Girl Scout, which is a kind of an organization here in the US. I actually don't know if they're international or not, but they do lots of activities and learn lots of things, but they sell cookies once a year for the month of February, roughly. And I've been helping her sell cookies. So 2 hours ago, we were standing at a booth in front of a restaurant selling cookies. And now here I am. So it's been a busy week. Good, but busy. How has your week been? And these are the weird parts where this is why I want to invite somebody else to come so we can just talk back and forth until questions show up, because it's going to get awkward just watching me stare at the chat waiting for a question. But if this goes well tonight, then I think the next one I'm going to invite one of my friends along and have them answer questions. So yeah, what's on your minds? I mean, I can just start talking about stuff if there are no specific questions, but yeah, this is exactly, Matthew, awkward laughter. Making the slow transition from my old digital performer for music setup to Reaper for both sound effects and music, but suddenly I wondered if I should just go all in with Logic. Crazy. No. So here's my thought on the DAW thing. If you're going into TV or film, learn Pro Tools for sure. If you're going to work in the game world, learn whatever DAW you're most comfortable with. Honestly, I mean, I guess maybe there's mild hesitation about Logic only because I've seen some game studios. If you're doing an in-house job, I've seen some game studios where their IT department won't deal with Macintosh machines. Macs, sorry, they call them Macs now. I don't know why I say Macintosh. I'm old. So you may run into some weirdness if you're on a DAW that's tied to only Mac and doesn't run on Windows, but I would say that's pretty studio specific. But generally, like, if it makes sound, it's valid. Like, if you can make sound effects and do your job with Logic or Reaper or Pro Tools or Ableton Live, whatever, it doesn't really matter. I think much more important is, can you make good sounds and can you get the job done quickly with whatever your chosen tool is. So I wouldn't think too much about that. And again, like, if you're happy making sound effects in Digital Performer, like, other than the Mac caveat maybe being a weird thing, and I mentioned that because I'm a Mac user and I've had a couple studios look at me a little weird when I was like, yeah, I want a Mac, but nobody stopped me. I mean, that's the only thing that's maybe a little strange. But hey, how's it going? I owe you feedback. I know, and I owe Miguel feedback too. Dang it. Um, I'm sorry, I'm behind on things. So how much background did I start with? School, etc. Okay, so I started with some background. I did go to school. Before I went to school, I played keyboards in a Spanish industrial band from Dallas, with a few friends. Um, and so as a result of that, I'm not a very good keyboardist. I think I was in the band because I was friends with them, and I was they liked me and they were nice to me. And B, they they needed somebody who they needed somebody in the band who knew how to record and mix stuff, and I was the guy because it was me and a guitarist and a bassist and a singer. And so I was the guy who could operate the drum machine and actually record our stuff into Cubase and mix something. So I had that experience, and prior to that, I had a whole lot of noodling and Cubase and learning music because I was just interested in making music, but not video game music. Again, I mentioned earlier, like the music I grew up on: New Order, Pet Shop Boys, Depeche Mode, that kind of stuff. Like, and that was kind of what we were doing. I say industrial, we were light industrial, but um, anyway, I kind of figured out that I had figured out that I wanted to do sound for games. I went to Full Sail in 2003. I think this was when they did an associate's degree in 1 year. And back then it cost $30,000, which is a lot of money, but it's school is a lot more money now than it was in 2003. I did that for a year. I got a pretty good crash course in recording in a studio, running Pro Tools. They were very, very like recording studio focused, and there was only a little bit of attention paid to audio post-production. And for game sound, there was very, very little information. But they gave me a really good foundation in things like signal flow and recording and how to record things correctly and not clip them and all this other stuff. I did not come out of there a fully formed sound designer by any means, but I came out with a good foundation of knowledge that I was then able to, learn from on the job. And my first job, again, I was a keyboardist in a Spanish industrial band thing. I had done some remixes for a handful of artists on a couple of record labels. And one of them, I was venting to him one night as I was approaching the end of school about how I'm trying to find a job. I don't know how to get a job doing what I want to do. This was early 2000s. You never really saw sound designer jobs get posted on the internet. I didn't know anybody. And this guy, also named Mark, a friend of mine, he said, my day job, he has a music band. He has a music project he's been doing for like 30 years now. But he said, my day job is I'm an advertising producer, and I know it's not game sound. It's not what you want to do, but I'm a client of post-production studios. And if you want to come visit, I'll go introduce you to some of the audio post-production studios I work with, and maybe we can, get you in front of the right people and get you an internship. And that was how I got my first job. And then once I got in with that, I kept pushing to try to get over to game audio, and I eventually jumped over about a year later. So that's the origin story. I did have some school, but I also had a whole lot of experimenting with sound before then. I scraped my money together and bought a MIDI keyboard and a really crappy audio interface, and I used some pirated software because I didn't have the money when I was a kid. I was a teenager. I worked at a drive-through. Like, I had nothing to start with in that regard. But that was how I got in. All right, now we're starting to get some questions. This is awesome. So let me just start working through the questions. Talk about occlusion and how to best implement for realism. There are some real misses when it comes to realistic occlusion. What is your typical approach? I feel like Wwise could use some. Oh, it scrolled. It could use some better tools than just a LPF moving around. So I'm going to be real with you. I have not shipped a game with Wwise yet where I was responsible for occlusion settings. I have done some sound design helping out other people. on their projects, because the studio I work for, Certain Affinity, we're a co-development studio. But on those projects, I have not been the owner of occlusion settings and occlusion functionality. Based on playing with it a bit, yeah, it very much seems to be kind of a combination of applying low pass filter or using portaling, which is cool. We didn't have, it's been years now, but my memory was that our tech on Call of Duty wasn't necessarily great with occlusion either. You know, to me, the ideal solution in my head would be a system where sounds portal and transmit through surfaces based on what the material type is and how many portals there are between a source and a player. Because, you know, I like to think of, imagine like a heavy robot like walking down a hallway, and you're at the end of the hallway inside of a door at the end of that hallway. You'd hear a lot of the low or the high frequency sounds coming down the hallway, bouncing down the hall, bouncing through the door, but you'd feel a lot of the low end stuff just transmitting through the floors and the walls, right? I would love to see a solution that kind of gets more like that. I don't know if that's achievable with Wwise. As it stands, the experiments I've been doing, and this is something I've been playing with in the last couple of months, and I'm going to continue playing with more because I'm not happy with the results yet. But the experiments I've been doing lately have been more about just applying EQ curves rather than just straight a low pass, rather than just a straight low pass filter. But I agree with you. There's not a great solution. I think to get a really realistic solution is going to be computationally fairly expensive. But I haven't seen it. I shouldn't say I haven't seen it done right. I have not worked with tech that I feel does it right. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It probably does. Let's see. Have you worked with both Wwise and FMOD? How different are they? I'm asking because I'm going all in on learning FMOD, and I'm a bit scared of missing out with not learning Wwise. By not learning Wwise. They're fairly similar. There are some real differences in terms of interface and the way you work with things, but functionally, I feel that they're fairly similar. And I also feel that meta sounds and sound cues in Unreal are similar. And, you know, tech I've used in proprietary engines. I mean, ultimately, we have something that's an instruction set for how to play back a sound, and then we have actual sound assets, right? So you've got sound event, which is what Wwise calls them, sound alias in id Tech, sound cue or meta sound in Unreal, FMOD event and FMOD, and then you've got the source assets, right? And you're just kind of figuring out how to set up the instructions for playback to play the source correctly. At the end of the day, that's really what game audio middleware tools are doing. They have different interfaces. They do things in different ways. One of my biggest pet peeves is that every tool has its own terminology for things, which kind of drives me crazy. Like, again, with the example I just gave, you got FMOD and Wwise events, sound cues, meta sounds, sound aliases in id Tech. I think, do they call them sound shaders in Source Engine? I haven't used them before, but I've heard that term thrown around. Like, we can't even agree on what the damn event data is called. And I think that makes it more confusing. But I think if you can conceptually get your head around what a piece of audio middleware is, I shouldn't even say middleware. If you can get your head around what audio technology is doing in a game engine, I think you'll be fine. And what you'll find is that transitioning to something else, like going to Wwise from FMOD, is going to be like learning a different DAW. You know what to do. It's more about where is the button and what do they call it in this particular piece of software. That has been my experience switching to Wwise from the Call of Duty tech. And it was a little weird because that tech was pretty old and we were still editing sound event data in spreadsheets. So it was kind of, I joked at the time that coming to Certain Affinity in 2000 was the first time I worked with Wwise professionally. I was telling people, I feel like I just got out of a time machine. Like, fast forwarded 20 years in time and got out of a time machine and was like, oh, we have a graphical interface now. This is neat. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. I would really focus on getting your head around conceptually how game audio works and the kind of things you can do. And then you can worry about translating that to Wwise or to something else as your needs require. That said, if you get some downtime, I do think it's worth learning Wwise, just because that seems to be the most used middleware out there. But if you're in a situation where you're on a project where they're using FMOD and you've got to learn it for the project, I wouldn't feel bad about learning it and going there. I don't think it's going to hurt you. But just do pick up Wwise whenever you have a chance. I see Tomas answered my question about how is your week. How much have I knew a client? I guess I got burned out today. Finally sank in that a Switch has a little too quickly, but strangely enough, Helldivers 2 is cute. I have not played Helldivers 2 yet. I'm really excited to play that. I'm sorry your week was a little rough, but I hear you. I sometimes get burnt out too, man. It can be rough. Hello, Miguel. Let's see what else we got. For someone who loves, here's another question. For someone who loves right brain composing music and spotting and laying in sound effects, but hates left brain mixing mastering, are there any awesome tutorials for mixing mastering that will make sounding better, less painful? I mean, I could point you to some stuff to read or learn from regarding mixing, certainly. Although I don't necessarily agree with the left brain, right brain split. I actually find music to be a very creative endeavor. And I really enjoy it because I feel like there's a lot of, you can control the information that the player receives, but you can also really control the emotions of the player quite a bit by controlling what they hear and how loud versus how quiet versus all this other stuff. So to me, they're both creative jobs. The things that really feel like technical only jobs are when I'm troubleshooting signal flow or dealing with problems. That feels like the technical work. But I even feel creative when I'm dragging wires around on blueprints or scripting. So maybe I'm weird. I don't know. That's just how I view it. As far as tutorials, so there's two angles there, and I don't know if we're talking interactive mixing or linear mixing, and I'm going to give answers for both because you're saying things like spotting and laying in sound effects. But for linear mixing, there is a guy named Thomas Boykin, Boykin, on YouTube, who has done a number of videos on, he's actually got a series of videos, I think they're called Audio Post-Production 101, where he takes some independent film he worked on and he walks you through the entire process of editing, mixing, all of it. There's some really great stuff there. There is I'm thinking here, what's the other one? There's a guy named Paul Maunder who's also done a few tutorials on mixing stuff, also on YouTube. There's a guy named Chris Burgess who's got a blog post or two. I'm trying to remember what his website is called. It was a weird name. I can't find it. I'm trying to find it. He had a blog about mixing cinematics, and I want to say he worked. I want to say he worked at Riot, maybe, or maybe he worked at ArenaNet. If I can find it, I'll go tweet it out. But he wrote a pretty cool blog where he talked less specifically and more conceptually about how he organized things in linear mix. And just kind of like, again, high level, but how he mixes, which it felt like there was a lot of cool ideas in there that you could then translate into whatever DAW you're working in. And I learned a lot from it at the time. Yeah, I see Mason saying Chris Burgess. Okay, so it was Chris Burgess. I don't know the guy. I just stumbled upon his blog. I stumbled upon his blog at some point, and now I, of course, cannot find it. But I'll try to find it and post it. And yeah, he's at Probably Monsters. I see that. Anyway, the blog post was brilliant. Yeah, there you go. He used to be a cinematic mixer for them. Okay, cool. I was close. So those are some resources I would look at for linear mixing. For interactive mixing, honestly, this is very, very recent, but there was an article that just got published in, God, was it called Technology Magazine? Maybe. Let me look at my history. I'm going to drop the link in the chat. There was an article that just got published about mixing God of War Ragnarok, and they talked to Jody and Alex Previty and Sonia and somebody else from Sony about mixing that game, and there's some really good stuff in that. Come on, why can't I find links today? Hold on, I know it was in Discord. Let me fire up Discord and I'll go grab that link. Anyway, that was a really good article. And also, if you have the ability to, I think you can still buy a pass for the Game SoundCon from 2023. I think you can buy a digital pass still and go watch the talks. There were 4 deep dive talks on the sound of God of War Ragnarok. Those are gold. Go read those or go watch those. Take notes. That was an absolutely fantastic series of talks that gets into a lot of detail. There was also a book that came out recently by Alex Riviere. I may not be pronouncing his name correctly, that I also thought was really, really good. And I think it's just called Game Mixing or Game Audio Mixing. But those are some resources that I think are really worthwhile. I mean, I could talk in depth about specific topics, but I don't want to like bore everybody to tears here. And I don't even quite know where to begin because it's such a massive topic, but those are some good resources for mixing interactively. And hold on just a second. I've got this link. I'm going to drop it in the chat unless somebody's already beat me to it. Nope, nobody beat me to it. Yay. There is the link to the article I'm talking about. Those folks at Sony, like Jody, Alex, Jeremy Voyo, they are, I hope they don't watch this because they'll see me fanboying about it, but they are the best in the business, in my opinion. I think they do absolutely phenomenal work. So anytime they talk about what they're doing, it's worth reading. Let me scroll up a little bit. Occlusion, great answer regarding services. Exactly what I was thinking. Maybe something custom made from the ground up in coding. I don't know if FabFilter has really set the bar for low CPU, high performance plugins, so I see no reason why others can't do the same. Yeah, I agree. And it's funny you say that, Matthew. There are a number of plugins that I wish I could use at runtime, and the FabFilter plugins are among them. I'd love to get a good Lexicon 480 reverb plugin that I could use at runtime instead of making IRs from them, which is what I do currently. Victor says, now for COD, they have their own tool similar to Wwise. Nice. I'm curious if there was a thing that I think Neversoft cooked up that was a GUI for editing sound aliases that looked really promising, and I don't know if they pushed that forward or not. I wonder if that's where it went. But yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear they went forward. That tech was, it's funny. I kind of pick on it for being crusty, but man, it was performant. The thing was very powerful. It just was not super user friendly, but you could do a lot with it. Let's see. All right, I'm scrolling down to see if I can find the next question. I'm telling here in Airwiggles and because yeah. All right, I think I'm actually caught up. I don't see any other questions. So somebody hit me with a question and not a baseball bat. What's on your mind? What do y'all want to know about? Oh, there we go. Do you have any resources which you recommend for learning Unreal Engine sound sources? I'm thinking of picking up the game audio implementation book by Richard Stevens and Dave Raybould. Yeah, let me think about that for a minute. I haven't looked for specific resources for sound sources, sound cues, and meta sounds. I know Dan Reynolds has a YouTube channel. Dan Reynolds is I'm not sure if his title's totally accurate, senior technical sound designer at Epic. Really, really sharp technical sound designer, works at Epic. I don't know exactly what his title is right now, but he has a YouTube channel where he's done some interesting meta sound demos. I would also go look at any sound demos you can find from on Epic's YouTube channel. Maybe look at the documentation. Honestly, I don't know of any like real specific tutorials beyond just the stuff I've seen on YouTube. But I know Dan's videos on meta sounds at least were really, 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 really great. There's some very good detail there. As for the game audio implementation book, I've heard that one's really good. I've not read it cover to cover. There's a really bad chapter in that written by a certain guy who's talking into a microphone right now that I would not read, and I wouldn't waste your time with that. But yeah, that book is supposedly pretty cool. I have not read the rest of it. I have children. I don't have time, and I wasn't working with Unreal at the time, and I'm working with it now, but I'm still working with Wwise, so I haven't had much of a reason to learn that stuff. But yeah, those would be my best recommendations. Let's see here. What else is on your mind? Does anybody feel like volunteering to get on the stream and either ask a question or say something? Because I kind of just want to test it and see if it works. If anybody's willing to get on camera and talk for a minute. If you're willing to, say yes and chat. Okay, good. You found the YouTube channel. Yeah. After working on so many projects and hearing millions of sounds, what are some examples of sounds that have blown you away when you heard them? Oh, geez, I don't know. It's usually not individual sounds that blow me away. It's the combination of things in a certain context. So it's a combination of sounds plus mix plus implementation plus all of it coming together into an experience, right? I'm thinking of lots of great moments. I'm just deciding one or two to mention. There was a scene in Inside where you as the little boy are doing this thing where you're kind of hopping over this fence, and there are these dogs that are running down this hallway to the end of the hallway to get around to get to the other side of the fence, and they'll keep doing this until you figure out how to get past them. And I can't remember how to get past them right now, but the sound of that moment was just so cool. The dogs sounded very threatening, but they ran all the way back and then they ran all the way forward, and they did such a good job of handling the propagation and the reverberance in that space. I mean, maybe this is taking me out of the experience, but I actually went back and forth intentionally a few times just to listen to it because it sounded so cool. The Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart really blew me away as a whole. When you get into the chaos of any really big, busy moment in that game, including the beginning of it, like the fact that there's that much going on and you can still hear everything you need to hear at any given moment was amazing. Alan Wake 2 is one that really blew me away in the last year. And again, it's not a specific sound. It was just the way everything came together. That game has got such a feel to it, and the sound supports it 100% of the way. And the fact that they were able to do that across gameplay and cinematics and in-world TV shows and video overlays and all this other stuff they had going on just kind of blew me away. But yeah, I mean, I'm sorry if that's not a great answer. I very rarely find myself say, wow, that was an incredible sound effect. I'm much more about, wow, that was an incredible experience or an incredible moment. And it's kind of more than the sum of all the moving parts. I guess that's how I think about it. And I don't know if I've heard millions of sounds. I probably have. I've certainly not made millions of sounds. I wish. How important is originality in creating sounds for games? It's it depends. It depends on the project. The way I view this And I mean, talk to somebody else, they may give you a different answer. For me, the important thing is finding the right sound for the experience. It's about finding the right thing to give the player whatever you need to give them, whether it's information, whether it's a feeling, whether it's immersing them in an environment, whatever. Sometimes, if you're really, really lucky, you'll go browsing around in a sound effects library and you'll just find it. And it may take a little bit of pitch adjustment or a little bit of EQ or something, and it just works. Other times you have to record stuff and you may beat your head against a wall for 2 days trying to make the right thing. So, you know, I don't know if this is necessarily what you're asking, but I've been asked before questions in the vein of like, do you just pull sounds from sound effects libraries, or do you make sure you change every single thing? Like, are there certain things you have to do to a sound for it to be okay? And my answer is yes to all of the above. I do whatever's necessary to get the right sounds into the experience to make the game we're trying to make. And if that means I can pull a sound off the shelf and it just works, great. Most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time we at least have to tweak it a little bit, or we have to tweak it a lot. So I guess originality, I don't know. I think if you're making a good experience that really speaks to the player or to the viewer, if you're working on film or TV, I think originality is less important than just doing something really good. I think creativity is more important than originality, if that makes sense. But certainly if you keep doing the same thing over and over, and we're getting more into the holistic making of games rather than just sound, I do think that if you continue to do the same thing over and over and have no originality, you will eventually start to lose people. There are certain game franchises where you start to see that, right? I hope that answers the question. That's a good question. That could go in a lot of directions. What else have y'all got? What else do you want to know? I am totally bringing somebody next time so that we can chat back and forth while we're waiting for questions, because I feel like I should dance or something. I don't know. It's awkward. Who else is here? I'm going to go peek at the guest list. Cool. Hey, Cassidy. I recognize that name. Hello. I guess until somebody throws a question out. Yeah, it's good to see you. Thanks for dropping by. I'm just answering questions as you do on these sorts of things. What was I going to say? Until somebody talks, I guess I'll just, chill stream. I'll just talk about things, I guess. I saw the Nintendo Direct this morning. I'm one of those Nintendo nerds. I like every game system, but I'm super excited because they showed a new version of Shin Megami Tensei 5, which I'm super nerdy for those games. That's going to be fun. All right, here we got another question. How much more impressive is an implementation demo reel rather than a linear redesign when applying for a game audio position? Okay, so I mean, less people show implementation, and I think that's a good thing to do. I would say most impressive is a demo that shows implementation skill, but that also shows good design skill. Whether that be redesign of gameplay or even showing off. Well, honestly, I think the coolest demos are where somebody has built something playable and they show a video of that so they can say, hey, I took this demo game or whatever. I did my own sound pass on this. Here's how I implemented it. Here's how you can listen to the end results. And whether it's a video capture or actually sending us a way to play a build, which we can't always do that, but sometimes we can. That to me is the best thing. We're getting into a time where, we've had a ton of layoffs. We're having to get more done with less people, which really sucks. I wish we had bigger teams than we do right now. So I think showing that you can not only create great sounds, but also hook them up is really, really important. And I think that helps you stand out. And not only create great sounds, but create great experiences, like be able to pick the right sounds to put them together to tell a story or communicate information to the player regarding whatever they're seeing. So I would say, you know, good linear redesign is good. Implementation demo is a little bit good, a little bit better, a little bit gooder. I can't believe I just said that. A little bit better. Both is even better. So I would do both. So next question. Hey, Mark, I'm starting on a new project soon and I'm in the planning phase for sound. What is your process for planning for audio on a new project? This is a tough question. It depends on what you're making. I think there's a few things to figure out at the beginning of a project. First of all, I would say look at what game you're making and figure out what the design pillars of that game are. Like you've got it. I mean, there's going to be a team making this game. What kind of game are they trying to make? What is important to them about the experience they're making? And then think about how audio can best support that experience, right? So that's really important. Once you've kind of figured out aesthetically what you want to do, and there's more to that process. There's building mock-ups. There's you can build little audio stories that kind of help figure out what the aesthetic of the game is. Then you've got to start looking at what your tools are. Like, are you using Unreal? Are you using built-in audio? Are you using middleware audio? And then look at the style of game you're making and start asking yourself questions about the things you're going to want to be able to do. Like I've done way too many first-person shooters in my life. So I'm going to just use that as an example, but do you have the logic to trigger footsteps and check the material underneath them? Do you have the technology to do that? Do you have the technology to propagate sounds to the world in the way that you want to do? Do you have the ability to attach sounds to the animations you need to attach them to? Are your team using gameplay cues for things? Like, there's all these technical questions that you have to start answering about what do I have versus what do I need to deliver the experience? And you'll probably find you can't answer all of that up front. You're going to have to start building a prototype and you'll start learning that as you go. But you start to figure those things out. And then as you do, you start to solve those problems, and hopefully you don't run out of time trying to solve those problems before you enter full production. But those are the things I'm usually thinking about. Like, what are the aesthetics of the sound of the game, and how does that support what the overall experience goal is for the game? And then what tech do I need to achieve that? And then there's also the question of, how many people do we need to achieve this? If we don't have as many people as we need, what tools and tech can we build to try to help us work more efficiently? There's a lot to it, but that's kind of a quick answer to, excuse me, sorry, I was running out of steam there. That's kind of a quick answer to how I would start that. And then obviously I would document a lot of that. I would write up kind of an audio design document, a technical audio document that outlines the technology you think you're going to need. And then you got to start collaborating with other people to, other people on your team to figure out how to achieve those things. Favorite SNES sound ever for me, the castle door sound in Super Mario World when switching screens. That's a good one. The first one, I don't know if it's favorite ever. The first sound that's popped into my head is the ticking clock in the title screen of Chrono Trigger. Love that game. Do you look forward more to working on fantasy games that require inventing totally new sounds, or driving sports military games that are more straightforward to spot and knock out? Creatively, I would say I probably most look forward to working on sci-fi, because I like synths. I like sci-fi as a viewer, reader, player. That to me is the most exciting. But I have things I love about just about every genre of game. But yeah, I probably enjoy the weirder stuff more. I tend to I tend to enjoy things that are challenging and push me out of my comfort zone. Like one of the first projects I worked on here after at CA after I came here from working on Call of Duty for like 10 years was a very heavy science fiction project where I was doing laser guns and rockets and space stuff, and it was just completely wild compared to anything I'd worked on Call of Duty, and that was tremendously fun. I'm working on a project now where I'm having to do some creature sounds, and I'm not great at creature sounds, but I'm learning a lot and I'm really enjoying it because it's challenging me. Those tend to be my favorite things to work on. Ideas on creating UI sounds for sci-fi. I hate and I love UI sounds. They are so hard to do. At least for me. I know some people that can just crank them out with no trouble at all, but I struggle with UI sounds because I have this idea in my head of how perfect everything should feel, and I never live up to it. But I think creating UI sounds, it really depends on your aesthetic again. Like if I were working on a game based on the original Alien film, it might be very mechanical with switches and keyboard key presses and things like that, because that game that original film rather had a very hardware kind of focus to it. If you're working on like really synthy stuff, just go crazy, try out different soft synths, run them through FX chains, 20 plugins deep. There's a really great YouTube channel run by a sound designer named Noah Citron that has all sorts of crazy ideas for mangling sounds beyond belief. If you're looking for inspiration, I would go to his channel and watch a bunch of his videos. James Denholm also has a couple of videos that are really cool. But those are some ideas. Do a lot of modulating of plugin parameters. Don't let things sit still, whether it's like using LFOs and Reaper to control plugin parameters or automating them. And do a lot of re-recording, like resampling your output. I do that a lot when I'm working on more sci-fi synthetic stuff. I will record the output of what I'm making and then take that recording and then run it through more stuff and keep performing and mangling it into infinity until I start to get something I like. Moving filters, comb filtering, like that kind of stuff can be really fun for sci-fi UI. Okay, so I got one from Cassidy here. I've been doing quite a bit more demo reel reviews lately. I'm curious about any do's and don'ts you may have about reviewing newly grad material, such as giving too much frame-by-frame direction versus broad strokes. I also tend to advise people to put their implemented demo separate from their reel, as their implemented sound is usually not as flashy as redesigns. Might have thoughts on that too. Yeah, I agree. I'm going to take the second point first. I generally would just have a reel that shows off sound design work. I'm going to just a second. I'm typing that guy's name just to make sure people know his spelling. Noah Citron on YouTube. Oh yeah, and James Denholm. There we go. Okay. So yeah, I agree with you, Cassidy. I normally tell people like have a reel that I can watch that's just sound design. And I tend to push people towards redesigning gameplay footage rather than doing trailers, because you're doing the same thing I'm doing. At least you were last time we spoke. I think you're still doing the same thing I'm doing. Working on sounds in a game is different from doing sounds for a trailer for a game. It just is. And when you're applying to a team to work on the sound of their game, they're probably going to be more interested in hearing what kind of sound design you can do for actual in-game gameplay stuff. Then for implementation, I think the best thing you can do, at least in my opinion, is have a reel that people can watch to get a quick impression of the kind of sound design you can do and how good you are at it. And then just have more videos on your site. And if that first reel wows them and wins them over, and keep it short, keep it to like a couple minutes, then they can go look at the other stuff. And then they can say, oh, you've got an implementation reel where you built this whole thing. And if your first reel hooks them in, then they can go look at the rest of that stuff. As far as reviewing newly grad material, giving too much frame by frame direction versus broad strokes. So I have a couple thoughts on that. I usually try to give them the 5 to 7 things that I think will improve the quality of their piece quickly. Like, go through it and just like review it as I review it as if I were reviewing my own work or somebody on my team, where I say, okay, here are the 5 changes I would make to make this better. And then once those are done, then let's talk about more changes and just try to slowly bring the whole thing up. But the first question I ask them is, do you want encouragement or do you want notes? Because some people I've found don't actually want the detailed notes. They just want somebody to pat them on the back and say, you did a good job, go get them. And they actually sometimes will even get upset with you if you give them detailed feedback. So I always ask first, like, do you actually want feedback? And then if they do, I try to give them like a good short list of things. Unless, like, sometimes if, like, I've had friends who are much more experienced ask me for feedback, and with them I'll give a much longer list of notes, but I try to give them a short list of like, here are the things that I think would push this thing up a bit, and if you do these and you want more, come back and we can talk about more. But that's kind of my approach to it. I don't know that that's necessarily right. That's just how I'm doing it. I'm curious to hear your approach to it, because you do this too. But that's how I do it, and that's also honestly how I do it to myself. Like when I'm working on something, like I had to do it was for an internal presentation thing, but I had to do a kind of a story trailer that was like 2 minutes long recently. And I would sit down and work on it for a couple of hours, and then I would get up, go walk away for 10 minutes, listen to some music, take a walk, come back, listen to it, and sit there with a notepad and write down, okay, like, what are the 10 things I can do to make this better? Go do them. Then walk away for 10 minutes, come back, listen to it again. Okay, what are the 10 things I can do to make this better? And just keep kind of iterating on it. So yeah, I do the same thing to myself. But yeah. All right, we got 10 minutes left. Any other questions? I do not hold the secret of the universe. I wish. So don't ask me that. But let me know what y'all want to know. Or if you got silly questions you want to ask, I don't care. It's 8:50 at night where I am. I'm going to fall asleep as soon as this is over. Yeah, go for it, man. It helps me a lot. And like I said, like, make sure you take a walk or something for like 10 minutes and decompress. Sometimes, honestly, I will pull out my little analog pocket and play a game for like 10 minutes just to get my head in a different space, so that when I come back and listen to it again, I haven't been laser focused on it, but that really helps. I don't know how your team is, but I very often will send stuff to the other folks on my team and just say, hey, listen to this, like, tell me how to make this better. Because sometimes, it's not sometimes, often running it by other people will they'll hear things that you won't necessarily hear. And I don't know if that's weird that an audio director would be sending their stuff to people that work for them. I don't really care. Like, I value my team's feedback, so I send them my stuff and I'm like, is this good? Like, give me feedback, help me out. And they do it, which is awesome. We help each other out. It's a good thing to do, in my opinion. I've got this little sign over here. It says won't impact audio. Last week it said, what did it say? Don't remember to include audio, I think is what it said. I don't know. I'm changing this every week. Nobody at work other than the audio team have noticed it, but every week it's going to have some like snarky kind of audio related thing about game development. You're very generous with your time on these sessions. Is there anything Airwigglers can do for you? Try a game, plug a podcast or book, feedback survey, etc. I'm going to tell you the same thing that somebody told me earlier in my career. And this is, I'm sorry, I'm like, this is totally like movie scene stuff and it's kind of mushy, but somebody gave me a lot of feedback early in my career and I asked how I could return the favor, and his answer was just do this for others when you can. So I feel that one of the things I love about the game sound community, and it seems to be holding true as it's getting bigger and bigger. And I sometimes worry about it. I don't want this to change. Is we have a lot of very kind people who are very willing to share knowledge and be helpful to each other. And there are some jerks. I almost said a word that I would have to bleep out of the video. There are a handful of them, and I've met a handful of them, and I've worked with one or two of them. But for the most part, game audio people are really cool, really kind people. So if you want to return the favor for me answering questions for you, just try to be cool and be kind to people and keep that going. Because again, like I have friends in film sound and TV sound, and it's not like that over there. There's little cliques of friends who share information, but there are lots of people who are really secretive. There are mixers who won't, share how they do anything. They'll lie about how they do things if somebody asks them. Like there's a lot of secrecy. But over in our world, you get people that are just willing to share knowledge and help each other out and just do that for others and be helpful to them. That is how you can repay the favor. Maybe buy me a beer if you see me at GDC. I don't care. I'm not expecting anything. I want this kind, fairly happy thing we have in Game Sound to persist. So help that persist. That is the thing you all can do for me. Any other questions? Yeah, I hear that, Scott. I have two of my best mentors are Hollywood sound designers who work on really, really big film stuff. And I don't know that I'm too old. I couldn't like go out there now and try to do that. But when I hear from them about what things are like out there, I'm very grateful I didn't go that path and try to get into that industry, because it sounds so cutthroat, and I wouldn't want to do it. I don't think. And I much prefer what we have here. And yeah, you're welcome. I hope this is useful. I hope people are getting something useful out of this. I'll keep doing it as long as it's useful to people. And like I said, I'm going to try to bring more people along, so it's not just me. Do I do music as well? The piano in the back. So there's a couple of things. It's so dark in here, and my office is messy. Sorry, I just got the Sora amiibo. I'm excited. This is the ARP 2600. I got this when Korg did the re-release of the 2600, and I got it basically because I'm a nerd for sound design, and Ben Burt used one to make a bunch of sounds for E.T. and Star Wars, obviously. I'm not actually the biggest Star Wars nerd in the universe, which I know is blasphemy. I'm much more of a Mass Effect fan than a Star Wars fan. And then I've got another one over here that's a Korg Op 6. I guess the real answer is I noodle with music. I haven't released music in like 20 years. I'm not going to tell you the name of anything I've released because I'm embarrassed of it. It's really old and it's out there, but I don't want people to go listening to it. But I noodle with music for fun. Again, my musical interests are the stuff I grew up with. And one of these days, I hope to start putting out some songs on Spotify and maybe release an album. I don't expect any success with it. I think it'll be fun. I sometimes use the synths for sound design when I get lucky enough to work on a sci-fi project. The Op 6, which is, I'm not pointing the right way. That one is actually really useful even for like magic fantasy stuff, because the Op 6 is an FM synth with a really, really user-friendly interface. So it's great for generating like bell and glass timbres and other weird things. But honestly, mostly I have the synths for my noodling, for sometimes jamming with my kids, and just because I like them. I'm totally the guy with 5 guitars in his wall that barely plays guitar. That's kind of what I am with synths. Would be fun as an alt version of this to watch you go through the process of spotting and designing a small scene sometime. Process is always fun to see. Yeah, I want to do that. It's funny. I want to do that, and I don't want to do that at the same time. It's kind of intimidating to do that. But I see the value in it, and I kind of want to do that. I have this problem with my machine right now, and it's been going on for like a year, where anytime I screen share for more than like 5 minutes with this machine, it hard crashes. And it's a Mac, and I have not been able to figure out what this problem is, but I'm planning to replace this machine this spring. And when that happens, I'm hopeful this will start working. I have dealt with Apple Care. I have gone as far as wiping my operating system and reinstalling everything, and it still happens. I don't know why. It drives me crazy. So I will at some point be able to do screen shares and actually try to perform stuff live. I will say that it's a little intimidating to try to do stuff live because, this is actually probably a good rant, mini rant for the end here. Although if another question pops up, I'll say it. It's a little intimidating to try to do it live because you'll see me fail a lot. And I'm saying this because this is true of most sound designers I know. The first thing I do never works. The second thing I do doesn't always work. I often try things and go down rabbit holes and waste time trying to find the thing that does work. And I used to feel really self-conscious about that. I used to really struggle with it, and I didn't ever want anybody to see me work, and I didn't want to be honest with it. But I saw this video that somebody posted on YouTube, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago now, where they redesigned something that somebody I knew had done the original of. And this somebody that I know is a name that you all probably know, and this is an exceptionally talented and well-known sound designer. And I messaged him and said, hey, this person did a redesign of your stuff, and they're talking about how they did it, and they seem like they're a really big fan of yours. And this person responded to me and said, it's so weird when somebody acts like they're a fan of my work because they think that I do all this great work and they don't see the 100 wrong sounds I put on the Pro Tools timeline before I found the right one. And I said, really? And he was like, yes, all the time. It's never right the first time. And he kind of ranted for a minute about how he never gets it right the first time. And he sometimes goes through hundreds of iterations on things before he finally gets the right thing. But people only hear the end result, which is really, really good. And that's why everybody views this person as this wildly talented sound designer. So that's why I say I kind of dread it, but it's also valuable. And I think it's an important lesson for all people to learn. And to make another comparison, I think this is true of creative people beyond just sound designers. I got to meet one of my favorite songwriters a number of years ago. A guy named Glenn Phillips. He used to be in a band in the 90s. Actually, they're back together now, called Toad the Wet Sprocket. They're a weird band named after a Monty Python skit of all things. But anyway, the guy's an incredibly talented songwriter, and I met him at a meet and greet thing after one of his solo performances, and my wife and I are both big fans. And I have always had this passive interest in making music and songwriting. And like I said, I may release something someday, but I asked him for advice on songwriting when I met him, and he was super kind to us in general. But he said, I think my biggest advice is to just write a lot and throw most of it away. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. He's like, even today, I've been doing this for 20, 30 years. You only hear 1 out of every 10 or 12 songs I write. The rest all goes straight in the trash can. And it just kind of shocked me that somebody who is that level of songwriter, extremely accomplished, toured the world, has written theme songs for TV shows, was saying, like, still after 20 to 30 years, you only 1 out of maybe a dozen songs survives. I think it's true for most creative people. You just got to get used to throwing a lot of stuff away and keep digging until you find the right thing. I hope that's useful, but it was very eye-opening to me, for whatever it's worth. All right, before I shut off, is there any last questions? Anybody want to know anything else before I take off for the night? I'm going to give it a minute. I need to get a little soundboard so I can play like the Jeopardy music when I'm waiting for a question. Maybe. I don't know. See, now the problem is I've waited and left this long pause. And then I'm going to say, okay, well, I guess there's no more questions. And then right after I say that, somebody's going to drop a question in the chat. And I'm going to be like, oh, no. All right, I'm going to go to sleep. I hope this was useful. If this continues to be useful, I'll continue doing it. For now, I'll plan to be back here in about 2 weeks. I'm going to try to bring somebody next time. So I'm going to hit up a couple of friends and see if somebody will join me and answer some questions. So have a great night, everybody. And yeah, okay, I see you missed the answer to your question. Yeah, it takes a few hours to process. I should have the video by morning, and then I will try to get it uploaded tomorrow and posted. So you should see your answer soon. But yeah, next time I'll try to bring somebody else along who can answer some other questions and give you more of a perspective than just mine. But thank you all for showing up, and I hope you all have a wonderful couple of weeks. See y'all around.